PL, professional learning you can consume during lunch or on a dog walk or while you get your car washed. Our goal is to provide meaningful, engaging, and brief conversations for educators. I'm Kate, and my co-host today is Jenette. Hey, Jenette.
Hey, Kate.
This is the first episode in our behavior management series, and I want to start with an analogy that our colleague Devin Healy uses. I've heard him use this in a training, and he talks about this analogy of you walking down this beautiful river on a hike in the mountains, and you're just looking at this beautiful river, and you look out in the river and you see a dog. Now, it's very safe. It's in a basket floating down the river. This is a thought experiment, okay? So he always says, like, what would you do? Oh, you're going to go kind of wade out, grab the basket, bring the dog to shore. And he says, okay, you do that. And then you look out and there's another dog in a basket. And so you wade out and get that dog. And then there's another and another. And pretty soon you're asking yourself, well, what's down the river that all of these dogs in baskets are floating down? He says you hike down, you see that there is some, doggy daycare right there down the river with a hole in the fence that these dogs are somehow getting out of the hole into the baskets and down the river.
The baskets are waiting right on the other side.
Oh, yeah. In this thought experiment, okay. There's baskets so that they're safe.
Devin, where did you come up with it?
Well, I remember the first time he told it. He said there was a dog in the river and people were like, oh, no. And he's like, oh, no, it's safe. Like, he didn't want it to be about.
Right. Yeah. No peril. Basket's fine.
So he said at this point, right, we're going to fix that hole in the fence. We're going to fix the hole in the fence because until we fix the hole in the fence, we could be wading out into the river all day. But the real problem is making sure that that fence is patched up. And he always tells that analogy and then says you can't intervene your way out of a tier 1 problem. So today we want to talk about tier 1 interventions. So for example, a task that you're asking students to do might take too long or is too hard for students, and you're going to start to see misbehavior. And you could spend all of your time managing that misbehavior or giving consequences for that misbehavior, but that is, in fact, a tier 1 problem. And so looking backwards at the task and analyzing the task is going to be more effective than wading into that river to gather the dogs in baskets. So this is a great place to start with our classroom management series. And we want to talk about tier 1 interventions, why they are effective, and we're going to give some ideas for each one of these interventions.
And Kate, can I just say, if you are wondering, is this relevant for me as a teacher, then I would say if you finish a day of teaching and you are feeling emotional, if you are feeling discouraged, if you are feeling overwhelmed, or any of those big emotions, that it's probably a sign that there's some kind of hole in that fence that we can work on. And maybe sometimes it's even hard to name it. Like, I just know I'm frustrated. I just know I feel emotional. I know that the kids get to me. Then you might think, okay, this might apply to me. And it's not just new teachers. It's veteran teachers all up until the semester of retirement. Managing the students and their behavior in our classroom never goes away.
It's interesting, whenever you start talking about management, what we instantly want to go to is those interventions, right? When we talk to teachers, it's like, well, what do you do if this happens? Or what do you do if this happens? And that is an important conversation, which will absolutely be an episode in this series. But more often than not, the place to start is, let's look at the tier 1 thing, what happened before the behavior. So our first tier 1 intervention, Jenette is going to talk about, we're going to talk about engaging lessons.
So recently I started watching Alone, the TV series about the people who are left in grizzly country in this particular season. And you already had been watching some of Alone.
I love it.
And
it's
we
great.
were talking about it, and you said it's the kind of show you can watch while you're scrolling on your phone and kind of have in the background. You're paying attention, but you can let some of it go and jump in and out, as we like to do with our phones. That's not what we want in our classrooms. right? That is exactly what we're trying to work against, is students tuning in and tuning out. So if students would say your class is the kind of class where you can just wear one AirPod, and be listening to your music, then that should be a sign I'm not engaging them as much as I want to. So again, happens to all of us, happens every day after lunch, right, or after an assembly, or when anything's been disruptive, on a late start, etc. We can make a list of all the times when students are in and out as far as engagement goes. And you know some of the basics about engaging lessons. What are students involved doing? What is the teacher doing? What are the students doing? You want to kind of double plan for that. But I wanted to talk about a couple of other things that might be just a little different way to look at it. One, have you promoted the relevance of what happens in your classroom for students? Not that they're going to all become scientists for a science teacher, or they won't all become great writers or English teachers, or whatever your content area is. But if you can make them believe that what happens in your classroom is relevant in their lives, their thinking, their future, their opportunities. It's actually more interesting than I thought it would be. Oh, this feels like, this teacher is someone I'm connected to, and they are passionate about this. All those ways build relevance. And then the activities, if you can help them have as much choice as possible in activities, that kind of engagement is more real. Another thing that I saw is students are engaged when they are attracted to the work, when they persist despite challenges, and they take delight in what's happening in your classroom. So those are things to think about. Now, all the different ways that we make our lessons more engaging, that's fun to talk about, and we can always explore that more, and we can certainly Google ideas for making lessons more engaging. But those are some of the signs of engagement or disengagement. AirPod in, scrolling, okay, I got to work. But if, on the other hand, kids come in, they're kind of interested, they persist when it gets hard, and if it looks like we're having a good time, there's some laughter, then that's the sign of kids who are engaged in your classes. And we've all had the experience often of, especially for secondary teachers, the first time you teach it, you can feel that I don't have them. And so you make some adjustments for second period, and you make some adjustments for third period, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, this is a much better lesson. That's often paying attention to the engagement of the students.
Yeah, reading that audience. All right, I want to talk a little bit about movement. And we've all been in a training or professional learning where the trainer tells us to get up and go talk to a person across the room. And there is a kind of a collective resistance or groan, even with adults.
We've taught those lessons and we've been a part of them.
100%. Like, it's so funny. I know it's good practice. I'll put it in my trainings. And then when I'm sitting in one and someone says, go find a partner, I'm like, no, I would rather just be a passive learner.
Don't you make us?
In this. And so there is always, even with adults, there is always a moment of resistance. But what we have noticed is there is always a change of energy. 100% of the time,
it's amazing.
Energy changes after the resistance. There's this moment of groaning, and it happens with adults, it happens with teenagers, it happens with, less with elementary kids, but sometimes. And it is so important for learners to move. In fact, Dr. John Rady, in his book Spark, describes they did some work at a school where they had a PE teacher work with students for 30 minutes of exercise right before school started. And they had other schools where that wasn't happening, and they were kind of monitoring behavior problems. In the school where they had the PE teacher, this was an elementary school, the PE teacher doing this 30-minute rotation, they do like 10 minutes of basketball, 10 minutes of something else. Behavior problems dropped 83% compared to the control group. And that is, you can't argue with that kind of data. The change is palpable. And so capitalizing on that in any way we can. And we can get creative with how we have students moving. We often do turn-in talks. Have them stand. Mm-hmm. There will be a groan, perhaps, but if we do it, it will change the energy. Maybe there are answer keys posted on walls across the room so they have to get up and look. Maybe there are some four-corner discussions that we're inserting into a lecture. We can get creative with kind of building that naturally into the work we do with kids.
Yeah, it's really so amazing the way people start smiling and laughing, even if it's stupid, even if it's just that button that we have that's the 30-second dance party. It just gets the blood moving. It gets the energy up. It's a relief from the sitting. So, boy, expectations are really important in that, and then the way you make it happen. But it's never a bad thing.
Absolutely. The next tier 1 intervention we want to talk about is student voice, or more students talking. We asked Jack Halls, who is a social studies teacher at Farmington High School, to submit an idea about student voice, and we want to listen to that and discuss it first.
One of my favorite strategies to get students to open up and discuss in class is just the classic think, pair, share. I know it's not fancy, but when it's done well, it works really well. So some of my take on it is a little bit different. The very first thing is to have good questions that are open-ended, that apply directly to them. I might have them on a PowerPoint, or I might come up with them on the fly, but they need to be questions that apply to them, so something that they care about in their life. Find some way to tie it back. And then the think part of the think, pair, share, when I say, all right, think about what you would do with this answer or how you would respond to this, I don't give them a lot of time to think about it. I give them maybe 10 seconds, and I'll literally say, okay, you have 10 seconds. And then when they pair, when I turn to a partner, I like to say, if I'm going to be doing this over and over again during a class period, I like to have them all, I say, who's your partner, and make them point to their partner. Because half the time, if you say turn to a partner, you're going to have a third of the class that doesn't do anything because they don't know who they're talking to. So I like to have them, I say, okay, point to your partner. You have 5 seconds, and they'll point to a partner. And anybody who kind of gets left out, I'll pair them up real quick. It only takes a few seconds, but it makes it so that that's more effective. And then when I tell them to talk to their partner about the question, I use a timer. I have a watch, and I pull out a timer, and I say, okay, you've got 30 seconds, and like there's the magic words are ready, go. I say ready, go, and if I forget to say that, they'll just kind of sit there and wait and wait and wait. But when I say ready, go, they suddenly start talking. So that's like magic words. And then I give them the 30 seconds. I say 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and they all quiet down. And I say, okay, let's talk about it. And I call on specific groups, or I'll open it up and just let anybody who wants to, kind of depending on the question. But I find that once I've done that, if I don't give them too much time to think or too much time to partner up, then they don't have time to get off topic and forget about what it is. So I like to keep it moving using a timer. And ready, go is my 2 favorite words when I do this.
I think it's great to be reminded of some great structures that can help promote strong student voice discussions.
Yeah, and the fact that he does it often enough that it's just what we do in this class, and he has his certain procedures to go with it. Yeah, it's a great strategy, and it hits a couple of things about student voice in a classroom. One is this idea of every student every day. That should be our goal. Every student speaks in my classroom every day. Now, logistically, it's hard to have 35 kids speak individually, if I'm doing a class discussion or answering questions, but I can have their voices heard by their partner in a table talk, etc. And that is powerful because we are building a community of scholars. And both parts of that are important, the community part and the scholars part. So community is, we're part of a community, we talk to each other every day. And once you get used to doing this, it feels like, well, isn't everyone having students speak in their classrooms every day? And the truth is, no. Kids can move from class to class and really not say any words. So that's part of it. And then the scholar part of it is like, we need to be sharing our learning with other people. We need to be sharing our ideas. When I was at Leslie Butler's classroom at Mill Creek Junior High recently, we asked her about all of the talking her students do, and she said, how do I know what they know if they're not telling me? So she was constantly checking for understanding. So that the goal is every child or every student every day. And then you have to find a variety of ways to make that happen. It can't be the same thing every time. It can be turn and talk. It can be standing table talk. It can be give one, get one. It can be write it on a snowball and throw it to me, and I'm going to pull some of them up and answer. I mean, just make a list of 10 exit tickets. That's voice as well, right? If students are writing, but everybody's contributing. I'm checking their learning every day. And then just make sure you have a good little collection of those that you use.
Because students will talk in your class most of the time, so structuring it so that it's appropriate is really effective. All right, I want to talk about brain breaks really quick. And I have said this before. I used to not believe in the power of brain breaks. I was very concerned about student time and wanted to make sure my lectures were really packed full. I thought that brain breaks were kind of a waste of time. No more. No more. But there is something that I have learned. The most effective brain breaks are structured. Have students creating a secret handshake. The 30-second dance party Jenette mentioned before. Go to Headspace and get a guided meditation. Something that is more structured is going to be very effective for students. And if you're worried about getting students in and out of a brain break, if you feel like you're wasting time, practice right before you release them, right? You're going to say, all right, we're going to have a 30-second dance party. Right at the end of the 30-second dance party, as soon as the music stops, I need everyone in their seat silent. Okay, let's see. Pretend to talk. Pretend to move. Oh, okay, stop. The music's off. Pretend. Go. And we're going to practice right before. We're going to remind them of the expectation, and then we're going to jump in. Put a slide in your PowerPoint or a little note in your lesson plan, and don't feel bound by where you put it. Put the brain break when you need it, when you feel that lull, when you feel the energy dropping. It's going to be a powerful tool.
They will love it. That's a great way to, and I love how the structured ones where we stay in community, right? We stay together as a class. It's not just get on your phone for 5 minutes, because then you lose them to a million different places and thinking about a million different things. Okay, a little bit about fostering positive relationships. That's really at the heart of all this behavior and classroom management. I know. Is, are you building the connection with your students? Are you getting to know them? Do they know you? Do they know you care about them? It really is just the most important thing you can do. If you haven't already got a way that you have a questionnaire or some way to get to know them, it can be as simple as when you hand out the 3x5 cards, which you're going to use for maybe cold calling, which is what I like to do. You ask them to write something that you're an expert at. Write something that's a hobby, something you're learning about, and write something you'd like me to know about you. 3 quick things that any kid can do in 2 minutes. You collect the cards, you keep the cards all term. You're revisiting that, and you're getting to know those students, and then you're using that in your conversations with them. You're using that as examples when you're talking to the class, etc. So foster those relationships. Make eye contact every day with every student, especially the ones who avoid it, and you will see them. You will see the ones who avoid making eye contact. Try to say names as much as possible. Remember that you're still the boss in that space. So a relationship doesn't mean that you're equals in the space. It doesn't mean they control the flow. They get to make the big decisions. That's you. That's you. But you still make sure they know how welcome they are in this space with you.
I want to just say a quick thing about class incentive programs. There's lots of discussions around extrinsic motivation for behavior with students. And I think that we can all agree that we want students to be intrinsically motivated in the work that they do. Of course we do. However, sometimes that's not where we start. Sometimes we have a group of students that need something extrinsic to help them learn and kind of set the tone of a class before we slowly move off of it, which I would strongly encourage for any incentive program. Our colleague, Allison Riddle, wanted to shout out Hadley Frost, who is a second grade teacher at Farmington Elementary, where she does an incentive program kind of like teacher versus students, but instead of doing teacher versus class, she replaces the teacher side with like an oops column. And she's really good at calling out the positive things that are happening when they earn a point, and then really good at that teaching moment when she's doing that oops column. And so there's so many different incentive programs that you wouldn't even need a tangible reward. It could just be the points. But the key here is whatever you choose, whatever you want to implement, make sure it's something that's yours, something that you think would work for you in your personality, in your flow, whatever that is, to kind of teach the skill and slowly build the skill before we move to that intrinsic motivation.
Okay, I think I'll just give a tease for the next one because I don't think we have time to get into it, but it really kind of moves us to another podcast episode, which is about routines and procedures. And I'll just share something I learned that this week, a good way of looking at it. Our friends Kellen Davis and Ashley Davis, who are two outstanding teachers in the district, were teaching some of our newer secondary teachers, and they said, anything that's causing you distress needs a process or a procedure. So that is, as soon as I heard it, I thought that is 100% true. If I'm having to keep talking about cell phones, talking about we sit where the seating chart says we sit, whatever it is that we keep having to talk about again and again and again, there's a procedure that will help us with that. So that'll be part of our next episode.
Yeah, I think our next episode in this classroom management series will be about those strong procedures, strong routines, and those expectations. All right, I have loved talking about Tier 1 interventions. Hopefully it's been a good review, kind of a good recommitment. We'd like to give a gift, which we don't usually get to give gifts anymore. So mine today is the book Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. Definitely one of the best books I read this year. So fantastic. Go read it.
Yeah, I know. I'm really excited about that one. I was going to give a book, but I think instead I'll give a blogger who's also really big on TikTok, Instagram. She's all the places, and her site is Half Baked Harvest, and she just makes the most delicious looking food. I haven't baked anything or cooked anything,
but you still have gotten joy.
Oh my gosh, so much joy, and I am going to try a couple of things over the holidays. So Half Baked Harvest. She's great.
As always, thanks to our producer, Tom, for making us sound so good this season. We're also putting video on the podcast on YouTube. Check out the show notes for that link. Thanks for joining us. Please like and subscribe and share the podcast with others. See you at school.